This is the Coaching Life Podcast, episode number 65. Well, folks, Pat and I just recently surpassed a milestone, and we didn't even realize it. Our podcast has officially been airing for 1 year as of July 29th. We couldn't believe it. Well, we had a local journalist contact us recently and said, hey, we'd like to run a story on you guys in our newspapers because of your podcast. And we were quite shocked, to be honest, but we are also very flattered and very honored, of course, to be asked to do such a thing. And so this episode is going to be portions of that interview where we talked about our coaching experience, about our podcast, and some of the things that we talk about, and the questions that Alex asked us were just really provoking, thought-provoking. They really made us consider what our purpose is in doing this podcast. And so we felt like this would be a good interview to record, and we asked him if he minded if we used it as one of our episodes. And we think that you'll really enjoy this. It'll help you look behind the scenes a little bit and get an idea of what drives us and what motivates us to just keep doing this on a weekly basis. So we hope you enjoy this one. It's episode 65, and we are cruising into year number 2 on the Coaching Life Podcast.
Guys, first let me say I love the show. I haven't missed
Thank you.
it.
Yeah, thank you.
That's one of the reasons when I got switched into news, I thought of you guys to do a story on, kind of get the word out to all 3 of our counties. And I just wanted to say, first of all, thank you guys for doing this with me. And thanks for doing the podcast, because I think it's great.
Certainly our pleasure. We thank you for wanting to do a story. We never would have dreamed that somebody would want to do a story over our, it's good to know someone's listening. That's good that we have a listener.
Yeah, definitely.
So first, if I can, let me get some coaching background from you guys. Because I know there's obviously, both of you have different coaching experience, and I want to get that right when I get this in the story.
No problem. You want to
I
start,
better
Pat?
go first, Coach, because I don't want to follow your coaching resume. So I've been coaching Alex youth sports, baseball, basketball, since I was around 16 years old. So unfortunately, that's about 24 years.
16 years old. See, I didn't know that.
Yeah. The first baseball team I coached was a 12U Little League team out of Rutland. I helped my buddy Jeremy Pierce.
Mm-hmm.
This would have been 1997, 98, something like that.
Okay. I was in St. Louis.
Yeah. So, yeah, from an organized team perspective, that's pretty much the extent of my coaching resume. I've coached baseball, coached basketball, I've coached travel teams. I've coached local rec teams, probably more rec teams than travel teams, just because that's what you do more of as your kids are young. But aside from that, though, I've been a different type of coach for the last 14 years. I've been a dad coach, and I would say I probably learned more about coaching over that period of time than ever all the time put together. So,
yeah.
How many kids do you have?
I have 2. I have a 14-year-old and a 10-year-old.
Coach Stewart, I know you have 2 kids. Is that right?
That's correct. Both of my children are now in college. I have a who's about to be a 22-year-old here next week. Actually, Brock is my son, and he's going into his senior year at Alderson Broaddus University in West Virginia, and he will be hopefully playing his last season of baseball here this spring. They're all back on campus, so that's good news for him. My daughter transferred to Ohio University this year. She spent 1 year at Waynesburg University, which is in Pennsylvania, and was set to play softball there and study marine biology. She played. She went through the fall season and then the spring practice season, and then played their first week of games in Myrtle Beach. And then when they got home is when they sent everybody home from the coronavirus pandemic that began closing everything down. And she had decided, actually, before going into the spring, that she was ready to take on the next chapter of her life. And she was very fulfilled in playing softball in high school, and kind of got to college and realized that college is a whole different ballgame, and you got to have a real desire to play in a college sport if you're going to play a college sport. And if you don't have that, you know it. And I think she realized it. And she said that she was ready to go ahead and move on. And she wanted to change her major as well. And so I can just see a renewed joy in her. And so we're happy for her and the decision that she's made to do that. My coaching experience, Pat, I just realized you said, 24 years you've been coaching?
Am I saying that right?
Or 25, 26? Yeah, I mean,
24 years.
So we've been, in terms of coaching about the same number of years, because I think I started coaching. I didn't start coaching until I was done playing, and I played college baseball. And then the year that I graduated from college, I had a really interesting opportunity presented to me. I had just gotten married. I had just gotten my first job in a church. I was working as a youth pastor in a church near Chillicothe. And I had a friend who also I played college ball with, who had, we all had dreams to play professionally. We all wanted to go and play pro. And even though we had started our, kind of starting our careers, everybody just kind of wanted to hang on to that possibility. And he was my catcher in college. He was one of our catchers. And he said, hey, let's go try out for that Chillicothe Paints Frontier League team. They were only in their second year of existence. The Frontier League was very new. The Paints now, of course, are a collegiate summer league team in the Prospect League, but years ago they were a professional rookie league team in the Frontier League, and that's how they began. And so we went over there and just had some fun. We played really loose, went to their open tryout, and lo and behold, I'll make a long story short, they invited me back for the next week, and I got to go to what would be their invitational tryout. And so I went back just for the fun of it. And at the end of that tryout, they start rolling out these tables with contracts on them and talking to guys about how if you've never had an agent before, we could appoint one for you to help you out understand this contract and what you're going to be signing. And I thought, whoa, wait, what are you talking about? And sure enough, someone wanted to pick me up to play in that Frontier League. It wasn't necessarily Chillicothe. It was, the Erie, Pennsylvania, the other teams in the league where they were doing it as well. The tryout was just there in Chillicothe, and so I didn't have a cell phone back then. This was 1994. I didn't have a cell phone yet. And so I went to a payphone there at the VA and called my wife and said, hey, I'm going to turn down a chance to play professional baseball because, it was a $2,500, $2,700, stipend or salary for the summer. They called that the short season leagues, those independent leagues like that. You got to make the team every year. You got a 1-year contract, and they give you some meal money, and there was just a lot of other things going on there that just I was like kind of like I said, the decision my daughter recently made. It was time to turn the page and make the next chapter of my life. It was time for me to turn the page, and so I went back to where we were living in Waverly, Ohio, and I started coaching a 15U team. And what I found was as much love. I found the love that I had playing the game, it literally transferred into coaching. And then the more I got into coaching, the more I realized I actually loved this game a lot more than I realized I did. And I learned aspects of the game that I just didn't. I took for granted when I was playing it, and I think it was one of the things that it makes people later in their years go, boy, I wish I had known then what I know now. I started realizing that really quickly, and so we took that on. When my wife and I moved to St. Louis in 96, and then we stayed there for 5 years. And while I was there, I coached a team. I started with a team when they were 11 years old and coached them all the way through until they were 16 years old. It was an Acme League, sort of like American Legion here. And then when I got back to Ohio, Coach Danny Thomas asked if I'd like to volunteer assist with the Megs high school program, and I said, sure, I'd be glad to. And while I was doing that, I connected with Jimmy McClure, who was coaching the American Legion program at that time. And Jimmy said, hey, I'm wanting to kind of get out of this, but I'd love for you to help us in the summer and then maybe take over that program. So I did that, and that was my first opportunity to coach guys who were 18, 19 years old. Some of them were going to be 20 years old, and found that I really, really loved that. I loved coaching that age group of players. And so that's what kind of launched me into high school ball. Coach Gibson and I ran into each other at the Convo, and I ended up coaching with Coach Gibson for 7 years. That's not true. It was almost 8 years with him. And then when he decided to retire, the way he told the story on our podcast when we had Coach Gibby on was he said that he went into the superintendent at the time, and Carl Martin, who was the superintendent at Athens at the time, and said, look, I'm ready to retire, but I'm not going to unless you can guarantee me that Chris Stewart's going to get the next head coach position for this program. And so I was able to have the privilege to take over the Athens high school program and be there. My goal was to be there for a long, long time, to still be coaching today. But then when my son came through, he came through after I'd coached there for 2 years as the head coach, and I coached him through his high school years, and then he decided to play ball in college. And I realized that as my kids got older, I wanted to be able to see them both play in college if they both desired to play in college. And I hadn't really got to see my daughter play much at all in high school. And so I made a really difficult decision to step away from coaching that team, quite honestly, at the peak of that program. We had just come off of a record-breaking season of having the most wins that Athens high school baseball had ever had. So some people enjoy stepping away at that time. I guess if you're retiring, then it would be more fun. But I wasn't retiring; I was resigning. And so ever since I stepped away, I've had the itch to get back into it. So here and there, in the meantime, I've been assisting and providing lessons with kids who want to train. That's about it.
So obviously, baseball and softball are your guys' backgrounds. You touch on everything when it comes to coaching. I really appreciate that. I think a lot of people get a lot out of that. Was that a conscious decision you guys made?
Well, I think it kind of goes back to what I said earlier, in that I learned more about coaching, when I became a dad than I ever did playing or actually coaching baseball, because the concept of coaching covers so many different areas, so many different concepts. It's not always just about the sport. It's not just about the skill, running football or throwing a baseball or shooting a basketball. There's a lot more about the game than that skill work, I guess you would say. So you learn that as you go on, as a coach. And I guess, it's fair to say that I've been fortunate enough to have a bunch of people in my life that have helped teach me that in a number of different ways. And one of those ways was a book called Building Champions by my buddy Chris Stewart, sitting on the other side of the remote session here with us, the Zoom session. But so I would just say that when you begin coaching, at least when I began coaching, the X's and O's meant a whole lot more to me than what they do now. And now you kind of understand that you focus more on, not to steal the words from somebody else, but you focus on coaching the person as opposed to the player.
Yeah. Can I say something else to that as well, just to elaborate a little bit on what Pat was saying? I think when it comes to conversations about coaching, in the conversations in particular that Pat and I have on the podcast about coaching, I'd say, because most of our background is baseball, a little bit of softball, and of course I left out. I have coached football and basketball as well. There's some opportunities to do youth ball, and then some middle school ball has been peppered in throughout the years as well. Baseball is my love, and I could talk forever on my own experience, but I don't want to do that. But the conversations that we have about coaching, they might be, I'd say 30% on the specifics of like the game of baseball. But when it comes to coaching, I'd say 70% of what you say about coaching is relevant across the board, regardless of what you're coaching. Whether you're coaching baseball, basketball, soccer, football, softball, volleyball, or hockey, or anything. I mean, ice skating, for crying out loud. If you are a coach, if you are mentoring other people, then I think we try to select conversations and topics of conversations based on the things that are more universal in terms of coaching. And really, quite honestly, you could say the same thing about just being a father, being a parent as well. The things that we talk about that deal with coaching, we'll talk about some specifics, like we talked about unwritten rules a couple weeks ago and things like that. And a lot of it was specific to baseball, but it can branch over into other areas. But a lot of times, I think what we desire to talk about the most, I think what we find we have the most passion to talk about, are those things that are really more relevant to life in general, and what it means just to be a leader of people. And we just happen to be talking about being a leader of young people, young kids, and helping molding, their, not just their athletic careers, but their entire lives, the way they think and the way they look, the way they respect other people, and so on and so forth.
I mean, obviously with your podcast, is geared toward coaches, I feel like. But I'm not a coach. I've never coached a sport in my life, and I've gotten a lot out of it, I feel.
That's really cool. Yeah.
As a sports writer. So go back to when you originally came up with the idea for the podcast and how it's evolved to what it is now.
We might need some help, Pat, about when we originally came up with the idea. I mean, it really did kind of morph out of the book didn't it? I mean, because you and I started having conversations just like personally. I mean, through text, or we'd go out to lunch, and then did one day did one of us say we should just do a podcast, and just decide to do it? I mean, do you remember where it started?
Well, it definitely started just through text messaging. We would mess each other back and forth about things that we were seeing and things that we were experiencing, and maybe complaining a little bit about things that we saw or liked and didn't like. But, and then, that kind of continued on into, lunch meetings and further conversations like that. But yeah, I feel like I remember the moment. I can't really remember exactly how it went, but you said something about, getting because you have a blog that you put a lot of time into, or have in the past, and I wrote a couple articles, and you said something about being able to share our experiences and thoughts together, and I said jokingly that it was jokingly, we should do something like a podcast, and you said, wait a second,
we could actually make this happen. Yeah. That's true. Well, okay, it's coming back to me now. I mean, if you go back to the beginning of our podcast, the first 8 episodes, we really focused hard and heavy on this concept of a player development program for youth as they're growing up, learning to play. And I think our conversations came out of an article that I wrote about that, about some of the things that kids are losing out on learning about the game. And then you wrote one, and we talked a lot about unstructured free play and the ways that kids just aren't allowed to go out and just play, utilize fields just for the fun of it, recreationally anymore, without parents there, without coaches there, without even officials being there. We have to call our own games, things like that. And we talked about a lot how we learned how to play the game. We learned so much about the games that we played, whether it be baseball, even football. We did a lot of backyard football too. And we're allowed to tackle each other without parents getting all been out of shape, and things like that. And we realized that, well, maybe there are other people out there that kind of feel the same way and just need permission to hear someone say, just do it. Let's just do it. And we just kind of started championing that idea. And when we said, maybe we should do a podcast, and I said, well, we can actually make that happen. What I meant by that is, I work at the College of Communication, and I actually oversee, ironically enough, our podcast studio. I oversee the scheduling of it. I support it. I take care of the equipment and maintain all of that, and oversee the student employees who work to schedule and help other students in the college, and faculty and staff. Anyone who wants to do podcasts can schedule that studio and utilize it, because it's one of the ways that our podcasting is a huge, it's become it's exploded, in terms of a means of communicating. And so we kind of set our lunchtime at once a week. And those first few episodes, those first 7 or 8 episodes, we actually did them in the same week. We recorded a bunch. Remember that, Pat?
Yeah, we were doing 2 or 3 a day.
Yeah, we went ahead and scheduled those out. They were scheduled out 2 or 3 weeks ahead of time, almost a couple of months, actually, it seemed like.
Yeah.
We had like 8 of them. And then we started having conversations on relevant topics that had just happened like that week. And we're like, oh man, it's not scheduled to go out until 7 weeks from now. And so we would insert it in there and call it a bonus episode or something, and so now we just kind of stay 1 week at a time. It's become more of a routine for us. And so it's gotten easier for us to just do it. And we're not obviously using the same equipment, so the same studio. We've learned how to utilize our phones and have a decent. We've done a couple podcasts where we've only used the app that we use, Anchor FM, allows us to record, and it records both ends with the same quality and saves it on the app, and then I'm able to go in and edit it from there. And it's not the same kind of quality as sitting in a studio, but for what we're doing, it certainly works. And so, it's become a lot easier for us in terms of our schedule.
I was going to ask about the changes that COVID have taken on you guys, but I'm glad you touched on that. One of my favorite things you guys have done is had some guests on. Coach Gibson those were my favorite episodes.
Awesome.
Nate Carroll was a great guest talking about officiating.
Mm-hmm.
Coach Deegan, I wrote down, I really enjoyed his episode too. Talk about some of your guests that you've had that you've enjoyed.
Well, those are 3 good ones.
Yeah. And looking at we can see some of the demographics, some of the numbers of how many plays a certain episode has had. And one of the things that we've noticed is every time we have a guest, those become our most popular episodes. But they are. I mean, it is better when you have a guest, but the ones you mentioned are some of the best ones we've had.
I don't know that we've had a guest on that, we were disappointed over. At least I don't feel that way. But, right off the top of my head, I really enjoyed our first guest was Chris's boy, Brock Stewart. And then it wasn't long after that we brought Kaylee on. Mm-hmm. And I thought, at the time, those were just amazing interviews that we had with them, and the knowledge that they could share with the kids that are coming through high school right now. It's just invaluable. It's just great stuff. But then, we had Mr. Dobnak, Randy Dobnak's father,
Rick,
the starting pitcher for the Minnesota Twins.
Cy Young candidate for this year right now.
For sure.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah. He's having a great year. And, but man, I mean, it's like you look at what Randy's doing in the major leagues and you're in awe of what he's doing. But at the same time, Rick Dobnak is such a sincere and great individual. And it was just, it was a phenomenal interview with him.
I think dads could relate to him.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
A lot of the people who listen to our podcast are dads, or who have kids that play, or dad coaches as well, and I think he's such a cool episode because he's living the dream that almost every dad has, that wants their kids to be able to play professional ball.
Right. And then Austin Dunphy was a good. It was fun to have him on because Austin was a person that I guess I can call him a kid, right? He was a person.
One of the kids
that,
I
coached.
You did too, yeah.
You coached that. We both coached Austin at different levels. So that was, and he's the coach of the Southeastern Ohio Copperheads now play in Athens, but we both coached him, so that was fun. And we've had some good ones for sure.
Oh, no doubt.
So you guys are with a bonus here and there, 64 episodes in, 34 in season 1, 30 so far in season 2. What do you guys see the future of the podcast as?
The long-term future. Well, if you hear Pat joking about it now and then, he's planning to retire as soon as we start making big cash doing this.
That's right. That's true.
Yeah, we've been flirting with seeing if we can't get maybe Joe Burrow to sponsor it, and then we'll just take it from there. We'll just go on the road and everything. We'll speak.
we can't get to it now that he's signed.
Yeah, he's unattainable now. Yeah.
I don't. For me, I think it's something that we enjoy doing, and we'll probably do it as long as we enjoy it, and as long as some people out there are still listening. So we're not delusional by any means that we're even though we do have listeners from different countries, but we know we're not a worldwide entity.
Yeah, that's right.
But as long as we continue to enjoy it, which I think we will, and people continue to listen, I don't know that there's really anything keeping us from doing it for a long period of time, unless Coach gets tired of editing. Maybe he does all the editing for the shows and
have to edit out all of Pat's cuss words,
all my mistakes, all my bad, my stupid,
all these little rants and things he wants to go on. No. Alex, I think one of the answers to that question is that the supply has to meet the demand, and as long as we feel like and know that we have something that we can contribute. I've had sort of a personal thing that I want to be useful. I want to be useful and significant in the whatever world that I come into contact with. And I think if we ever were just recording because it became a religious routine for us, and something that we got into a habit of doing and we no longer felt useful, then I think that would be time to say, okay, this has run its course. But I tell you, one of the most rewarding things to me is when I'm out in public, just like this past weekend, I go down to watch a little bit of fall baseball, and 2 or 3 guys come up to me and just kind of elbow me in the shoulder and say, man, I really liked that episode you guys did a few weeks ago, about helping players take ownership, and just, it was really helpful. And I talked to my kids about this or that, or man, let me tell you, anytime you guys talk about strength training, my daughter and I, we just can't get enough of it. We learn so much from those things. And I love hearing people give us that kind of feedback where they're, where we actually know, okay, this is useful to people. Because we've skipped a few weeks, not long ago. We just, because we quite frankly had nothing to say. There wasn't anything going on. We weren't doing anything. It's like, why just do why do episodes when we don't have anything useful to say? And I think we're starting to get that ramped back up. Well,
and to clarify that, I think, that was in the heart of the appearance of the COVID pandemic, and a lot of things weren't happening that we were expecting to be that are normally happening. So, not only did we not have a lot to talk about, but we didn't really know how well people would respond to conversations that we typically have, and based on what everyone was experiencing. So,
yeah.
Now you talk about getting that feedback when you're out places. Is there any one episode that maybe got you more than others, or is it just kind of in general?
I can't remember a specific one. I do know that every once in a while we'll have an episode that I'll hear from people more about than others. And I'll get texts, people stop me, like Coach said, when we're out and we see each other, and they'll say, man, I really like that last episode you guys did. but off the top of my head, I can't really think of one that sticks out. Do you, Coach?
For some reason, I want to say that we had a lot of interaction with people who, either through email or text or Twitter messages when we talked about strength and conditioning. And it even kind of prompted us, because we talked about it initially in a couple of episodes after having Kinsey Rourke on, the Ohio University softball coach. And then we brought Micaiah Branch on at the beginning of the COVID thing. I think he was one of our first Zoom interviews.
He's brilliant.
And
he's great.
And it seemed like every time we've had a strength and conditioning or strength training episode, people kind of latch onto that, because we're big proponents of that being one of the biggest deficits in a lot of players' game as they're working through adolescence. What do most kids need to do? A lot of them choose. A lot of their parents choose to spend $500 a week or a month and go out and give them more skills training. But one of the things that Pat and I keep talking about is they just got to get stronger. You could save a lot of that money by getting them a gym membership or getting the equipment yourself and help them get stronger. And it seems like when we say that, people like to hear it. I don't know. No one's really disagreed with it. I mean, but for some reason it's a popular thing. It's a popular topic.
Yeah, that's the answer to one of the, everyone talks about wanting to play at the next level, wanting to play college sport. And the easiest answer that you can give to somebody that comes to you and says, hey, what do I need to do to play at the next level? The easiest answer is you need to find your way into the gym. You need to work on your strength and conditioning.
Alex, I had a conversation yesterday with a gentleman who I highly respect. He's got a huge podcast. His name is Joe Ferraro. He has a podcast called 1% Better, and it's a project that he began years ago. He's from Connecticut, and my gosh, he's had guys on his show. He runs a weekly podcast. He's been doing it for now 3 or 4 years, I believe, straight. Before that, he did one with Kevin Wilson, who Pat and I actually had on our show, hitting coach. And Joe is, when I say he's had famous people, he's had like Seth Godin on more than once on his show, and people like this, world renowned authors and people who speak on various topics. And yesterday out of the blue, he texted and said, hey, I'd like to flesh this out a little bit. The conversation that you and Pat were having on your podcast was listening this morning and find it interesting. And we just had a little Twitter conversation. And Joe and I have had interaction like that before, just because we're baseball coaches. He was also a high school baseball coach. And on Twitter, on the internet, it's funny how you can befriend people in that way, right? Social media has kind of opened up the world for us in that way. And but those kinds of conversations happen too, not just the local ones, but it's really I think encouraging to know that people that you would consider to be at the top of the game that you're trying to do, just in your own home as well, are actually listening and providing some pretty positive feedback, helpful feedback as well. Yeah.
Now, one last thing, I think we're running out of time on Zoom.
Looks like it.
You talked about you've got some local guests. Obviously, Southeast Ohio isn't the prime area for a lot of things. It's not a hotbed for athletes. It's not a hotbed for podcasts. So what disadvantages have you found here, and what advantages have you kind of found podcasting from Southeast Ohio?
It's a good question.
Pat is
I guess I'm
Mr. Southeast Ohio, so I'll let him take the lead on this one. Everyone knows him in Southeast Ohio.
It's hard to answer because I'm obviously this is my first podcast experience. I did help a group of buddies, actually, Brendan Leister, who is a Pro Football Focus analyst and a coach at Avon High School. I helped him do a Browns podcast with a couple other guys several years ago, but so they might have had a little bit of a larger following, but I don't know. I would say it's kind of a double-edged sword. People know you, so they think it's kind of neat. They get excited about it. and so it's easy to get those, hey, listen to your podcast. Hey, didn't know you did a podcast. I've been listening to it. Good job. Keep it up and stuff like that. And that's awesome to, to hear. It's awesome for people to do that. But at the same time, I feel like because people know you, they may not always be truthful with you. They may withhold their opinion. They may not tell you that they disagree with you or something like that. Or I would imagine that there's people out there that know me that have listened to a couple of our episodes and thought, and these guys, they're crazy. That whatever they're talking about isn't right. But they don't reach out. And we've asked people like that to reach out to give us their opinion. So I feel like maybe that might be it. But for me, I knew. As you go through, if you try to become something, really, it's anything. It's not just being a coach, but if you try to better yourself as a coach, and you get into YouTube and you get into books and you get into podcasts, you get into all these different resources. For me, I felt like through our talks, me and Coach, that it was important to bring a resource to people in Southeastern Ohio that would connect them to all these other ideas and all these other resources that can help them be better people. So for me, it's a benefit that people know me, but also it's a privilege that we're able to do it in our hometown.
Yeah. I'd say one of the advantages is we've been able to advocate for rural America, because we've had people contact us from as far out as Colorado, in a rural town in Colorado, who've said, hey, I appreciate what you guys have said. We had someone contact us from a rural town in Michigan and say, we appreciate what you guys have shared about the way things are in rural Ohio. Because let's make no mistake, Southeastern Ohio, even in, let's say, the realm of high school sports for years, has gotten overlooked in terms of people assume that when you play a team, I heard it back when I was coaching American Legion ball. People just Lancaster is considered Southeast Ohio, but they don't think they are. They think they're Columbus. Lancaster would come down and play us at Meg's, and you could hear rumblings of, well, you know what you're going to get as far as officiating goes when you come down here and next to the river. These guys are just one jump, hop, skip, and a jump away from West Virginia. You know what you're going to get over here, right? And there's all these stereotypes and things that people have of rural America, in these smaller towns. And ironically enough, rural America has produced the greatest, one of the greatest college quarterbacks to ever play the game here, and we'll see what he does in professional ranks. And I think it's stories like that we can tell, because not only everyone now knows Joe Burrow's story they know his story from whatever media they've watched or chosen to listen to, but we've had the privilege of being able to tell the story from firsthand experience, having been there on the field when Joe was in 5th grade, 4th grade, actually coaching those youth teams back when he was playing. And when someone says, well, he's not a product of Athens, I can say, well, I tell you, he is a product of Athens, because I was here when he started playing when he was 7 years old. And, we've had guys in who covered him when he was in high school. Lucas Moore, a journalist, a graduate of the School of Journalism, and Lucas is incredible new young up and coming journalist who covered Joe. It had been Joe's junior and senior year of high school, and happens to just be a huge Bengals fan now too. So he's flying high right now.
Yeah, it's odd. Both of those guys only have one flaw that I'm aware of.
Yeah, but one of the things that Pat and I try to do is whenever we have a guest on, like we had a guest, one of our guests was the softball coach at Waynesburg University, where my daughter was going. And he asked us, he came prepared with questions for us, which was really phenomenal. Whenever we've had that happen a couple times now, where guests have asked us questions. And one of the questions that he asked us, because we had been talking about recruiting and some of the hurdles that we find that certain players from certain geographic locations have in terms of recruiting and getting the exposure that they need to be able to go and play in college. Because we understand that there are a lot of kids in Southeast Ohio who want to play ball in college. They just I think there's a number of reasons why they don't end up going. Is one, they just don't believe it's attainable. They think it's a pipe dream that only certain people from certain schools get to do that. They don't know how to go about it. They don't know how to go about reaching out to coaches. They don't know, coaches aren't coming to them. And to be honest, coaches aren't going a lot of places. I mean, it's just, they don't know that. They don't realize that. And so Coach Shimmick asked us, he said, what can we do better on the college level, on the college coaching level and recruiting level to, is there anything that we can do to make it better for the student athlete? And I said, one of the things that we have to realize is I think everyone knows that there is talent in these rural towns. And I think now that the world has become a little more open in terms of, the media has done an incredible job of showing us all the places of the world, not just the urban areas and suburban areas, but we get to see rural America now because even in rural America, we have Twitter, right? And so we said to Brett, it would be really great if there was a way that these kids could connect and you could see them play without them having to spend $1,600 a summer to play on a travel team, because a lot of them aren't going to do it, without them having to spend $200 to come to your camp. Because while we can easily say, hey, look, if you want to get in front of college coaches, you got to go to them, and I say that, go to their camps and things like that. But when we say go to their camps and these kids save up all their money and they may get to go to one, right? And that's it. That's their one shot. And so we said, look, it's not a level playing field, for one. It's not fair. But two, you guys are missing out. Just to be quite honest, you college coaches are missing out on a lot of players that would really have an incredible work ethic, who would come in with a blue collar mindset and just do what you want them to do in that program. And the reason why you're missing out is because they just can't afford it. They just can't afford it. And they'd be able to afford college. They'd get the grants, and you'd probably want to give some of them scholarships to play. They're that good. But you got to find ways to be able to connect with them. So I think when I use that story to say, I think one of the things that keeps us chugging along is we just want to be an advocate for these small rural towns that really tend to get overlooked in everything in the sports world.
Now, you say that and immediately comes to mind, if Joe Burrow doesn't come through Athens, all the players that have come through Athens, you look at the Lermans that are at OU right now doing great things. Do they get the look if Joe's not there? That kind of thing. So I definitely agree with what you're saying. Well, guys, is there anything else that you guys think I need to know to write this article about your podcast?
I would say for me, probably a foundation of the podcast that I think is really important from a personal standpoint is most of the things that I bring to the cast, most of the thoughts that I have, one, I've stolen from someone else. I feel like that's one thing that's overlooked in the coaching world, is that, very rarely are we creating anything. But two, most of it comes from the failures that I've experienced and the times that I, have come up short and maybe not even recognized it at the time that I was, but learned it later. So I guess it kind of goes back to the people that reach out to me and reach out to us and tell us we're doing a good job. It's all based on failure. It's based on wanting to be better and not always hitting that mark. So I think there's a lot of value in that.
Learning from that failure.
Yeah, exactly. And I would imagine there's some people out there that think, well, Pat Martin is doing a podcast, and I know more about baseball or sports or coaching than he does, and they might be right.
Then they play his team and they realize how quickly they're wrong.
No, they may be right, and I'm not. That's not, in no way is that my goal, and honestly, it's not where I pull, most of the thoughts that I have. I pull it from my inadequacies that I'm working on every day, trying to get better.
I'll ditto that for myself.
Well, guys, hey, I appreciate your time. I appreciate you guys doing this podcast. I think it's great. Whether agree with you or disagree with you, just people starting the conversation for people is very important, and I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thanks for
very
doing
much.
this, Alex. Appreciate
Yeah.
it.
See ya.
See you, brother. See you, coach.
See ya.